Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Bradley, and I am the Senior GIS Programmer for the City of Suffolk, which is the largest independent city in the state of Virginia. We have a population reaching upwards of 100,000 as of the last census. We are the fastest growing city in the region, with numerous city assets spread out around 420 square miles. We receive over 10,000 permit requests a year and conduct over 30,000 trade inspections every year. Trying to get this slide to work.
You need to move your mouse. Okay, there you go.
We've seen with this increase, We've been Cityworks users since around 2005 with the AMS system, and we recently, in 2017, launched the PLL side when we needed to replace our permitting software. We have about 300 Cityworks users and growing, spread out across numerous departments, including public works, public utilities, planning and community development, capital programs, and even the assessor's office. If any city that's upgrading or expanding at such a rate, we've come through a lot of challenges that we need to address with our use of Cityworks, including the need to upgrade and expand due to the increased workload, but not having the technology on site to handle that. Availability of external access, as we had been using VPNs, which were very slow, and the idea of externalization of the site was not fully sold on our network team. Next was site availability when experiencing any internal network problems, and also data retention, continuous backup availability is there, and very limited storage and no limits on storage. We also had a problem with not being able to upgrade Cityworks regularly due to limited staff support on site, and we wanted to quickly take advantage of enhanced functionality in any of the new versions that were being presented by Cityworks, including with Respond, mobile, data analytics. Lastly, and most importantly, is that we needed to launch a public portal in order to allow online permit access. This was greatly accelerated by the COVID pandemic. Next, Adam from Woolpert will talk about what steps they and Cityworks were able to do to help us with these challenges.
Thank you, Robert, and good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Chanal. I'm a system analyst with Woolpert who helped out with this project. And so on this slide, we're talking about several different components of the solution, the first being the technology. And so step one was getting Suffolk from version 15.2 to 15.7 so that we can get them up to Cityworks Online. For those of you who may not be aware, Cityworks Online stays on the latest and greatest version, and it doesn't support the prior version. So you can't send them a 15.2 database and say, please host this for me. What you send them needs to be on the latest version and the latest service pack. So the upgrade piece of it was kind of step one. And that carries with it, all the normal upgrade steps, including the data migration tools and things like that. And there were some significant schema changes between 15.2 and 15.7 that had to be accounted for. The second big piece of it is the migration to the cloud. So moving everything to the cloud, not just the database and its configuration, but also the reports and the existing attachments, which for Suffolk, a longtime Cityworks user, it was about 0.5 terabyte worth of attachments that had to get pushed up to the cloud. So these things were, pretty big pieces of it. There was more to it as well. I won't go into detail of every last piece of the project, but it's also worth noting that there were some GIS updates happening concurrently by Suffolk, kind of modernizing its server architecture, as well as the schema for some of its layers and things like that. And the GIS was not being pushed up to the cloud, the Cityworks cloud. So diving in a little bit more about how we accomplish those things, in the process of migrating and upgrading the database, we had to address custom database objects, and Suffolk had quite a few. it was actually about 200 custom database objects. So when I say custom database objects, I mean things like views, functions, stored procedures, triggers, things like that, that don't exist natively in the Cityworks database. And these had just been accumulated over time. Some of them were no longer needed, but understandably, I think folks have a hesitancy to delete something, with a thought that it might be needed one day in the future. So without a dedicated cleanup task, those custom database objects can grow and grow. And certainly some of them still were needed. But we had to systematically evaluate which functionality needed to persist from those custom objects, and then account for that one way or another, whether that meant moving some SQL logic from the database to a report, or using now inherent Cityworks functionality, because that covered a couple use cases as well. So we had to go through, after we cataloged all the objects, we had to go through and evaluate which ones were still needed, which ones could we drop and leave behind, and which ones would we have to account for the functionality in one way or another. Another big piece of it were the reports, and the City of Suffolk had about 200 reports in their on-premise system. And so what that meant was, between data connection type changes between 15.2 and 15.7, schema changes, and the fact that the GIS database and Cityworks database were no longer side by side, there was a fair amount of work to be done on these reports. And so just like with the custom database objects, we made a catalog, I should say the Suffolk DBA made a catalog of all these reports. And then we went through them, we prioritized them. We had a POC for each one that we could reach out to and say, are you still using this? Are any updates needed, things like that? Because again, over the years, some of these reports evolved. Some of these reports were like a version 1 type of report, and there might be a version 2 or version 3, and so no one uses the old ones. So in some cases, we left the report behind and said, this is covered some other way. But for the vast majority of them, we did bring them over to the cloud, and we did have to make some updates, whether large or small. So that was another big piece of the project, and that was certainly a joint effort. Whether it was the Suffolk DBA coming up with ideas or Wolpert sharing their experience, we kind of collaborated together and had a divide and conquer approach on getting all those reports updated, because it was a sizable list. Onto the business processes. I think the biggest change for Suffolk was for their IT folks in not having to manage the servers, and as well as hosting the reports in the cloud. I didn't really get into the details of the reports that touched GIS directly, but there were some, we had to account for those as well. And that required them to host a separate Azure GIS database that was externalized, but it only contained a subset of the GIS information required for the reports. So that was one change for them, but also taking things off their plate in terms of maintenance or troubleshooting or things like that. A lot of that was really now in the realm of Cityworks Online. They also have the option for database access, which is read-only, which is a read-only connection to the cloud-hosted database. And they actually did use that because they had a custom-built application that was used to looking at their database. And so instead of pointing to the on-prem one, they decided they would just keep that and point it to the cloud. And so that was another change on the business side of things. As far as people involved, there are a lot of different departments and stakeholders, as Robert mentioned. Cityworks is in widespread use, both AMS and PLL throughout the city. So throughout the project, we were consulting with different SMEs from each business group, as well as Wolpert and Cityworks. So one thing that we did that I thought was very helpful, especially towards the end of the project, the last several months, was have regular check-in meetings with Wolpert, with the City of Suffolk, as well as Cityworks technical staff, just to kind of have a check-in and get together and talk about ideas or any issues, or at the very least make sure we were all on the same page and everyone had a good comfort level for where we were going, especially in the run-up to go live. So with that, I will turn it back to Robert.
Thank you, Adam. As you can see, this was an all-encompassing project that took a lot on, but it accomplished a lot. Some of the benefits we've already been noticing is an increase in productivity, with city staff able to access Cityworks using any device that they have, including mobile phones and tablets. They also are not having any slowness issues that we previously had with our on-premise hosted solution. And there's not been any limitations when they're not within a city network system, meaning they could be out in the field as long as they have a cell signal, they're able to interact with Cityworks. This is really a big benefit on IT because we're not spending a lot of time on server maintenance and troubleshooting, as Adam mentioned. We've also had an improved website design overall, having to go through all of those reports and the schema changes and redesigning workflows and reports and how they function has been a big help to our staff and be able to get the information they need at their fingertips. The cleaned up database schemas have also been a big help when it comes to the upgrade process. Without having to worry about all of these custom configurations and triggers, the upgrade process is very smooth, and we have not had a single problem every time that Cityworks has applied a patch or applied an upgrade. One of the biggest benefits has been the early launch of our public portal site, which is enhanced case management, organization. It's relieved staff of having to notify case status by phone or email. They get a lot of phone calls wanting to know what's going on with their cases. And there's more benefits planned in the future as we expand the use of our online public portal access. Return of investment is something that most organizations do have to factor in. And while it's still early in our process and we can't give you a full report, some of the early stuff that we're seeing is better management of IT staff time, not worrying about on-premise resources running out quicker than we can get them replaced or upgraded, increased field access for our staff using Respond and mobile apps that we can quickly launch and have them working with in the same day, which has resulted in inspection turnaround times and notifications that have made the builders in the area very happy. As with any big project, there's always lessons to be learned. Some of the things that we've certainly gotten from this project is a better understanding of database schema requirements for Cityworks Online and how we needed to plan for those in the very beginning. Evaluating those schema changes between Cityworks revisions, especially considering we were so far behind in an upgrade cycle, is very important. The accessing of new functionality when talking about how we can better help our staff and going over these version changes and going over how their workflows may need to change is also something we needed to address a little quicker into the process. And most importantly is ensuring a fully understanding of the wants and needs of all departments involved. When we're working with an enterprise level system, there's a lot of stakeholders. And not all of them are fully on support of a project at the very beginning. But as the slide says, having a top-down buy-in and a bottom-up enthusiasm is the only way to have a successful project. So what's next? Well, we have a lot of continuous improvement going on. We're constantly making on-site improvements as we discover new technology and discover other issues that may arise from the way that our system works. And not having to spend time troubleshooting servers has given us a lot more time to do that. We're also hoping to launch new functionality like map logic and webhooks that we previously could not use before. Our continued rollout of our public portal access is going to allow more permit types to be applied for and give our citizens greater access to our system without having to come down to City Hall. Like I said, we're a big city, so not everybody wants to drive all the way downtown. The use of tools like data analytics is going to help us better understand how our assets are being managed and how our system is being utilized to do that. Community development is already using Respond and mobile apps in the field, which has been a big help. And now we have other departments like Public Works and Public Utilities wanting to come on board with those apps too. We're also working on a redesign of our capital programs Cityworks environment to make it easier for them to capture their assets, and then using tools like Cityworks Mobile and ArcGIS Collector. Our future plans also include a readdress of our water treatment plant's use of Cityworks with the use of the mobile app Respond and the mobile apps to give them easier access to the Cityworks environment, and even the possible integration of 3D GIS in the future. Thank you guys very much.